Well, hello once again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of After Further Review with Mark Ferreira, John Pelkey, Derik Abbott joining us today. Jeff Taylor apparently has paying work. Mark and I are still Googling that to see what it means.
And, so do you, Johnny. You've got a game tonight, my friend.
I do. We're doing this a little early because I have to go drive over to Tampa for my COVID test. Nothing like my 3 times a week, 3-hour commute for a 10-second swabbing of the nose and the mouth. But you know what? I'm COVID free, so that's a good thing. Lots of stuff to talk about here on our final show of 2020. Mark, we've decided we're not going to do a New Year's Day show, probably because you'll just be still stinking drunk from New Year's Eve, and I have to drive to Tampa for a COVID test. So
there it is. There it is.
Not going to be able to do that. But
everyone can just enjoy the football on New Year's Day. Where they've got this seems to me like the first year, and I could be wrong, that both playoff games are on the first.
I don't remember. I remember them being on New Year's Eve. I think that was the last time Notre Dame was in the mix. I think those were New Year's Eve games because he used to host the Under Armour All-American skills competition, and that was always on New Year's Eve. And I think I remember talking to folks over there about that game. That's how you know you're old, because I saw players who are now retiring from the NFL when they were high school All-Americans and announcing where they were going to go. All right, so a lot to talk about with football. Derik, I know we're going to get into a little bit of what you think maybe matchups for the playoffs, what good matchups and bad matchups for teams. But a couple of things I want to cover before then. We're going to talk about Drew Lock, because I keep getting people who just literally say he should never play another down in the NFL, and then people that we respect, like Greg Cosell, saying, no, that kid's got something. Let's not use Justin Herbert as the standard for people, that they have to be like all pro level the first year. The first thing I want to ask you about, though, because your Pittsburgh roots run deep, and that team started off like gangbusters, and then the bottom fell out. They decided they were going to play a really good half of football to bounce back and get a win this week. From what you've seen from them, they are going to rest people this week. Did they catch lightning in a bottle for a game? Did they find something that would work better for them moving forward, because they're still struggling to run the football? And I know most people think that might be a problem in the playoffs. Your overview of the Steelers heading into the playoffs at this point, at least offensively specifically.
Well, I think they got to get healthy too. They obviously had that week 4 bye. They've been really banged up. I thought that they looked like a tired football team the last couple of weeks. They look exhausted. They look drained. It almost like, the military term, the 1,000-yard stare, is almost what a lot of those guys look like they had. I thought in the second half, it really looked like, and you've seen this a couple years now, whenever they go into their 2-minute and Ben starts calling plays, and he starts giving this a lot with the over the mouth play calls. He really takes over, and the offense really starts to move. So I think that has a big component to it. Them wrapping up the division now really, really helps them, because now they can rest. They don't have to worry about getting TJ Watt or Cam Hayward or Ben or James Conner. They don't have to worry about them getting banged up in a division game against Cleveland. They can bench some of those guys, use this as their bye week essentially, and go forward, because I don't think the 2 or the 3 seed really, really matters all that much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've talked about that. You predicted that they would sit everyone, including the guy who's in charge of the fake crowd noise in the stadium.
Sit everyone. Yep.
And once again, you're right. There are articles that came out about how the reason why they exploded in the second half for the first time in, 14 quarters or whatever it was because Ben was calling his plays as opposed to the offensive coordinator doing his, par 3 type of plays, as has been described. So if they're resting folks, do the Bills do the same? And the reason I ask, because I think there is a little bit of a difference between 2 and 3. That guarantees you that you don't have to go on the road until you face the Chiefs, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty good position to be in, I think, especially if you're a cold weather team like the Steelers and or especially even the Bills. But knowing that Ben's going to sit, Connor's going to sit, and the like, do you think the Bills do the same thing? So, because right now the Bills are locked into 2 if they both lose.
So I think that they kind of do the same thing that New England has kind of done in the past, where they play Josh Allen, they play a couple of the other guys in the first half, and then no matter what the score is, you just bench them in the second half. It's enough to really kind of get your feet wet a little bit, but not build up too much rust. I think that that's really the most efficient way to manage that. I obviously never played in the NFL and never coached in the NFL, but that seems to be like, well, definitely not play it. My knees would beg to differ about that. But I think that that's really one of the more efficient ways you can go about this, where you have them play a couple series. You almost kind of treat it like that third preseason game, where you let them play a half and then get the other guys in.
Yeah, I mean, I like that idea too, because I do think it is important. And I think you're probably right, because with Roethlisberger, he's been around since, just after the Civil War. Nothing new. It's nothing new to him. Whereas the Bills, obviously playoff team last year, but I do think that it probably behooved them to keep on a roll. Many people now believe that they are playing better than Kansas City. Do you agree with that? And does that, in fact, even mean anything at this point?
No, it doesn't mean anything until January football, because, well, the Chiefs are just so freaking explosive on offense. And the best comparison I've seen is to the Golden State Warriors from a few years ago, that everything just snowballs.
Yeah.
So, they're going to put 21 points before, you can go get a sip of Gatorade, really. They're just that fast. They're that explosive. They make so many big splash plays. Well, the Bills can do that, but I don't think that they can do it to the degree that the Kansas City Chiefs can, just because of their offensive explosiveness.
And it does seem, right, Johnny. It seems like they can just turn it on at any given time.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of a worry, because I think we've seen that from teams before, where it's like, they've always been a flip the switch team, and I know that a lot of people disagree with that, but they do look like they can saunter into a game a little bit and then eventually turn it around. But if you look at their numbers this year to last year, turnover differential, points per game, average yards per play, it's almost exactly the same. The difference is they were a little bit slower out of the gate last year and got better as the year went on. And they seem to have gotten a little slow out of the gate this year. All right. So those out of the way, let's jump to Drew Lock before we get into any of this, because again, this has just fascinated me, because I've heard so many negative things about him, and full disclosure, I haven't seen a lot of Denver football this year. I mean, I don't think most people, and I watch the red zone, and that's frightening when you don't see a lot of a team, because you only watch when they're about to go in to score. A lot of negative stuff on the kid. We heard some good things early on. Kendall Gammon, who former NFL player, a friend of your dad's, Derik, and ours, former Kansas City Chief. He knows him because his son actually played, I believe, AAU basketball or something with him early on. So I kind of just not really thought a lot about Drew Lock. We heard a lot about John Elway not finding the right quarterback and blah, 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 all this. And then when Greg Cosell said what he said, and I'm that easily swayed by somebody who knows more than we'll ever forget about football, I asked you if you would take a look at Drew Lock and see if you thought the decision-making on this kid, really, I think it's silly to make it now. What are you seeing from him? What do you expect in the future? I think the ceiling's pretty high, but does he worry you at all, as he does so many people?
I don't think he worries me as many as other people would think or say. I think that he's a lot better than he's given credit for. He's really have all the traits that you really want in a quarterback. He's got a good arm. He can really make every throw. He's athletic. I actually watched the Chargers game on the All-22, the coaches film, and there's a couple plays where he makes out of structure that are really nice plays. So he can make all of those plays that are necessary in today's game. They also have, they also went through a ton of injuries this year. And I believe Vic Fangio, I think, has lost. They had some stat up where they're like losing games within like the last 2 minutes of games. So imagine if that's just flipped. So if like there's 7 games that they lose by, one score or one possession games, imagine what the narrative is if half of those are even flipped. So you really can't put that all on Drew Lock. I think that, just offensively, they have one of the better offensive line coaches in the NFL, and Mike Munchak, who they stole from the Steelers. Vic Fangio is a really good defensive coach. They have Pat Shurmur as their offensive coordinator. So I think that those building blocks are there for him to continue to progress just as long as he stays healthy. But he really has every trait that you would want out of a quarterback in today's game. Really don't know who to compare him to. I've seen like Daniel Jeremiah when he was coming out compared him somewhat to Mahomes. I don't really see the Mahomes comparison as much, but he does try and make those Mahomes-like throws every now and then. He obviously doesn't complete them as much as Mahomes does because Mahomes is from Mars, but I would give it at least another year because he didn't start, I don't believe, out of the gate last year. So, and he was hurt for part of this year, so he's never even played a full NFL season.
Right.
So, the narrative in the media to just throw quarterbacks out immediately is just, I never understand it, and it has so much to do with the structure of the organization, the culture that's set in, the development, and the people that you put around it. Because there's so many guys that just fail, and then people just want to dismiss them and throw them out because they're a bad quarterback. Ryan Tannehill was basically thrown out of Miami, and he's basically rejuvenated his career in Tennessee, and they're going to be a playoff team this year, you would think, and they're one of the better teams in the league. So the whole narrative of throwing guys out, I just never buy.
Right, and to me, it seems like the little that I've seen from him, the mistakes are kind of understandable mistakes by a kid who has 15 starts under his belt, 17 starts, whatever it is. It doesn't, and that's what kind of struck me. I guess I bought into the narrative for a while. The other thing that I think that's difficult for folks is that he may end up being the third best quarterback in that division and still be one of the better quarterbacks in football with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes in the same division. And I think, and I also think, Mark, that the fact that John Elway was a quarterback, everybody thinks he's going to be the quarterback whisperer. It's still the most in my mind, the most difficult position in all of sports to predict success for. And I think he bears the Elway factor comes into play too with Drew Lock.
Well, the thing is it's after further review, okay? And Derik brings it up. He hasn't had. It is too early to make any definitive conclusions on Drew Lock. Look at how we thought of Josh Allen coming into this season. We thought he was a middle of the road quarterback, kind of a middle of the road guy with a middle of the road offense and a pretty good defense. And maybe they get back to the playoffs, but probably not.
Right.
Okay. It's year 3. Derik, Drew Lock has not even had, this is the end of year 2 for crying out loud. And so we need to give these guys time, and it's just not the way NFL.
And you would think with the rookie salary cap, that we would have moved towards that. We get it when you gave Sam Bradford like $400 billion and a solid gold house that you're going to have to stick with him for a while. But now that you don't have the cap, but it's still continuing because today Colin Cowherd was discussing whether or not if Tua doesn't play well this week, that's pretty much the Dolphins should draft a quarterback. I mean, honestly, that's the discussion.
That is really stupid. That is really, really stupid.
He's been begged for 100-year-old Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mark. He clearly can't play in the league.
But that's only because Brian Flores is, reinventing what the quarterback position is, what the head coach position is in terms of dealing with a quarterback. Everyone was saying, if Tua ever gets benched, will he ever recover? Will his ego ever come back? You have to treat him with kid gloves. Brian Flores says, listen, if I have a closer in the ninth, if I need a closer in the ninth, I'll go to a closer in the ninth. I mean, that is the kind of coach you want, and Tua is the kind of guy you want in that position who is like all for it. And to your point, John, you've made this point many times. It's a very good one. He was there. He's experienced the very thing that's happening in Miami. All right, so let's go to our playoff scenarios because we love this. We do love this, and I want to ask you, Derik. And here we go right now. Let's see how we're doing here with this baby. There you go.
Oh, God, technology, Derik. We all apologize. We need a 9-year-old. If we could get a 9-year-old to deal with the technology, we would be great.
All right, so we're going to give the Dolphins a win because we're assuming Buffalo may not play their starters for more than a half. And we're going to give the Browns a win at this point in time. So now we've got Buffalo at the 2nd, Pittsburgh at the 3rd seed. Let's talk about the rest of the scenarios. And also we have, our person that was responsible for all of our gigs asking the question right now in our comments about can anybody play Baltimore? Because as we've all mentioned, they're kind of sneakily the most dangerous team or maybe the team that no one wants to play coming into the playoffs. So we'll address that as well. But talk about this week, Derik, and what kind of playoff scenarios you envision based on ESPN's playoff machine. It's the playoff machine.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers end up somehow pulling out that game against Cleveland, just because of Cleveland has a tendency to be Cleveland. Yeah, at times. Would not be surprised about that. If I'm the Steelers, I'd probably want to play in the postseason. I'd probably want a Miami to come up to Pittsburgh and play them, just because I think stylistically it matches up well. Yeah, you know, obviously all roads go through Kansas City, and they're not playing the next week, but that's going to be a tough out for whoever gets them. And I think really the team that has the best shot at beating them is Buffalo. I think Tennessee, if they get in there, are an extremely dangerous team. Just the way that they can run the ball, other than when they played Green Bay the other night, that I thought that would be a far closer game than it was. They just never really got rolling.
And they struggle to get pressure on the quarterback, and you saw with Aaron Rodgers, that's going to kill you.
They did, and that's really that offense is so quarterback friendly to begin with, and to have a guy like Aaron Rodgers pulling the trigger, that's really, really dangerous. So I think I think everybody would want a Kansas City Green Bay Super Bowl. If you have no dog in the fight, I think everybody probably wants a Kansas City Green Bay Super Bowl.
More than the Kansas City Tampa Bay Super Bowl.
I think it'd be more fun. Well, I mean, just because Tampa is such an interesting team that they're like a heavyweight fighter that they're going to throw a bunch of punches, they're going to miss, but the one that lands might knock you out. So you never really know which team is going to show up week in and week out. Are they going to team that puts 40 points up and blows people out, or are they going to lose to a team that they really shouldn't? So you just really don't know. But Brady in the postseason, it's really unmatched, really.
And that's why a lot of people wouldn't cheer for them, is that there are a lot of people who don't want to see Brady in another Super Bowl too. You're going to have the fight against that.
Especially in the region that I happen to live in right now. There's Tom Brady jerseys on sale at TJ Maxx for $12.99 everywhere. I think a team that if they end up getting in can do some damage is the Rams, as long as they can get Jared Goff healthy and he plays to the same caliber that he's played with Sean McVay calling plays and everything else, and he doesn't get into bad. The Rams really rely: is it good Jared Goff or bad Jared Goff? It's really Jekyll and Hyde. So they kind of live and die by it, even though their defense has been playing really, really well this year. Everything always comes back to Goff.
It does, and their defense is, I think, in terms of yards allowed or points allowed, one of those two categories, they're number one actually in the NFL. But they may not even get past Arizona this week.
Yeah.
Can they beat Arizona without Goff, who's not going to be playing?
Well, I did just see they re-signed Blake Bortles over the night.
There's your answer, clearly.
So the boat is back. So that should be interesting. But really, if you had to pick an offense that you could really just plug and play a quarterback, I think it's this one. I think it's the Shanahan one. I think it's the offense is really that I've been raving about on this show, probably more than I should. And I sound like such a homer, but those are such quarterback friendly offenses that rely on a lot of boot and play action stuff, that if you get a guy that just understands what he needs to do on a play and just be kind of a point guard and distribute the ball where it should be and don't turn the ball over, you're going to win games.
But see, I don't know if I agree with that, Derik, to tell you the truth, because Nick Mullins was plugged into that situation in San Francisco, and there was a couple of weeks there where they were almost perfectly healthy outside of their center, and which of course is a big position. But they didn't have Kittle, but they had Ayuk, they had Debo, they had Mostert, and Jusek or Usek. I can't pronounce his last name. At any rate, but he would be a turnover machine. He would throw interceptions. He would fumble, and if Garoppolo was in there during those weeks, they probably would have beaten Washington. They probably would have been much more competitive against Buffalo. They probably would have won a couple of. They probably would have beaten Dallas. I think Garoppolo wins you games. I mean, I do think the quarterback matters in terms of. I'm not sure Bortles can deliver the way Goff has. I'm not sure. I mean, I you're the expert, but this is certainly in terms of watching the 49ers, it's not quarterback proof, that system.
I think it's quarterback friendly. I don't think there's any system that's quarterback proof. I mean, like going back to Blake Bortles, they're one bad call and a Miles Jack fumble recovery away from going to the Super Bowl and playing the Eagles. So, I obviously you have a lot to build around. With the Rams, at least, Darrell Henderson going down in that Seattle game obviously hurts, just because they were kind of a running back by committee. So Cam Akers will have to step up. Malcolm Brown will have to step up in that game. I would trust the backup quarterback for the Rams more than I would trust the backup quarterback for the Cardinals, just because of the system that they run, and it's easier. I'm not saying that it's in the this foolproof offense. I think that it's just easier to drop a guy in there and have him understand what needs to be done, just because of the thinking and the all McVay essentially doing all of the hard work, and especially to a lot of their offense in Arizona relies on Kyler Murray's legs, him being able to make plays out of structure. That's not really reliant in the Rams offense.
Yeah, and you make a really good point, Bortles and Jalen Ramsey, strangely enough. I mean, that Jacksonville team, that was kind of, at that point, Blake Bortles was asked to take care of the football, not turn the ball over, and he played relatively solidly for a very, very good Jacksonville team, which seems like a million years ago that they had a really good team. Matt's bringing up, our once and future boss, fingers crossed, Matt bringing up the fact that that the Bills have a little bit of a weak run defense, and in the scenario that we're looking at right now, if the games play out, they would face a Baltimore. Of the teams that the Bills are looking at, because I think, we're all on the Bills bandwagon. They've played on national television, I believe, 3 weeks in a row now. Everybody's gotten to see them. Josh Allen looks amazing. Of the teams that they might face, Miami, Tennessee, Indianapolis, is it Baltimore? Well, Baltimore may be this for everybody, but is that the team that you think would give them the most problems?
Most likely, yeah, just because of the way that Baltimore likes to play stylistically. If you don't have good run discipline and don't know how to read some of what Baltimore does, it could really cause some issues. I think Baltimore is, healthier. They don't have COVID. I think everyone survived. So that's always
unlike
good.
Cleveland, which is still letting COVID people. God,
that's such a weird story. But yeah, so probably Baltimore would give them the most fits. But then you have you have a division rival in Miami that they could play. That obviously Miami knows them, so they play them often. And then they would play them, I think, back-to-back weeks, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's where you're almost like, if you're Buffalo, okay, how do we really want to play this? Do we want to put Josh Allen in and basically have him play 8 quarters against the Dolphins? In back-to-back weeks, or do we want to put the backups in, not show anything, and then kind of roll out everything the next week? So I think it's just a week-to-week basis. But I think that Baltimore would certainly give them issues. Indy has a potential too, just because they have such a good defense. Mm-hmm. And as long as Ben isn't calling plays for the Bills, they should be okay.
Okay, so we've got these scenarios right now, and what I've done is I've assumed. Are we assuming that Green Bay is going to beat Chicago?
Yes.
Okay, if we're assuming that, we're assuming New Orleans will beat Carolina. We're going with the Rams beating the Cardinals, and we're also going, the other big game in terms of playoff scenarios is the footballers beating the Eagles. So you see those setups in the NFC. Let's go quickly back to the AFC though, and Indianapolis going to Pittsburgh with that defense that Indy has. How do you see that rolling out? I mean, I know you think Pittsburgh obviously has an advantage. It's in the cold. It's out of a dome. I think that's a big advantage for the Steelers. But Indy has a great defense, but they just
Indy has has more of an outdoor team really playing in indoors the way they play the game, frankly. So
and that's true. I mean, is it a weird thing then to have them play 2 out of the last 3 games? Does that give Indy any advantage?
I think it does, just because of now that they've seen what Roethlisberger can do and that no huddle stuff. Their defensive coordinator talked about how they had run stuff that they had never seen before in that second half, just solely because Roethlisberger was pulling the trigger and calling plays on the fly, essentially. So they're obviously going to have a game plan for that and be ready for it. So essentially now you're really preparing for 2 offensive coordinators instead of just one. So you basically have your Ben contingency package, and then you have the Randy Finger contingency package. So I think that actually does play into Indy's favor, just because I think that Indy is such an interesting team, just because of the way that they play. They're able to run the ball effectively, and they play really good defense. So I think that would not bode well for the Steelers if they had to play them in the first round again. Just the way that they got after them. Now, defensively in the second half, the Steelers played outstanding. Even some of the plays, and the Steelers defense do take risks sometimes. They're also, if they can get a little bit healthier, especially at the linebacker spot, which in the last couple of weeks, if you've noticed, last week I believe they had a strong safety playing the inside linebacker position against the Cincinnati Bengals, just because they were out of linebackers, legitimately out of linebackers. So I think it all comes down to this week, that if they can get guys that are healthy, that know what they're doing, and they can execute their assignments, Steelers defense could be back into form. So now which team are you going to get? Are you going to get the second half Steelers, or are you going to get the first half Steelers? So, and you're not going to see anything out of this week that I think is going to give them any sort of momentum going into the postseason.
And you made a point also that offense that they ran was essentially a 2-minute offense, 4-minute offense, whatever you want to call it. And everybody, it's the old tired canard about those of us who don't know that much about football, just always go, well, if that works, then why don't you just run that 24/7, 365? Doesn't quite work that way. And I just want to shout out to Frank Reich, because I think Frank Reich is a very undervalued coach. And the rumor now coming down the mill, what people are talking about, is that perhaps Carson Wentz is Carson Wentz when he plays in a Frank Reich offense. So if he's on the move, Indianapolis with a 90-year-old Phillip Rivers, who has been the good Phillip Rivers for most of this year.
Yeah, no doubt.
And good for him. That maybe that's a place that Wentz could go. The AFC is so interesting. Let's jump to the NFC for a minute. We talked a little bit before. I'm not as optimistic about the Washington Football Club winning. I actually think my money's on the Giants to win that division. But what we did talk about before, Derik, and you could briefly go over, is Washington's offense. If they have Alex Smith, maybe they can put some points on the board. Otherwise, I think it's tough. But defensively, they match up pretty well against Tampa Bay because they can get all the pressure that they can get. Outside of the Washington defense scoring 14 points, is there any way that you see, though, that the football team could beat this Tampa team?
Well, I think that's one, is that that pressure up the middle, because that's really been the recipe throughout all these years of how to beat Tom Brady. Internal pressure, only being able to get there with 4 players or 4 rushers. That's really how you beat them. Offensively, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, just because I think Tampa's defense is pretty good. It might be tough. I would like to see Washington get in, just because I think it'd be a great story with Alex Smith and him really coming back. I think he solidified the comeback player of the year award the minute that he stepped onto a field. But again, if Alex Smith does play, I think that they have potential to win that Tampa game and really shake up the NFC postseason, just because I think that Alex Smith is a pretty damn good quarterback, and they have the recipe to beat Tom Brady.
So, Johnny, it's so funny because earlier in the week we were talking about the Washington football team, and you thought for sure they were going to beat the Eagles, and there it is. And now it's the closer it is. See, this is part of John Pelkey's pathology. Is that
I think this is a lot of fans, Mark. I don't think it's just me.
That the closer to the game, the more sandbagging happens. I agree. I think that's probably not just unique to John Pelkey. I wholeheartedly agree with that. So what I want to bring up, Derik, is that you've got Tampa, you've got Washington, actually, you've got Seattle, you've got New Orleans, and you've got Green Bay. Those are the top 4 seeds in the NFC. Is there a matchup realistically with any of those matchups that we have out there where you see those top 4 teams getting upset in the first round? Obviously, Green Bay is not going to play in the first round. So the top 3 teams in the first round getting upset.
Well, I think whoever Seattle plays, Seattle always has a tendency to have a stinker here and there. I don't think it'll be in the postseason, but every now and then, Seattle, their defense ends up, not even knowing who they are and do some really outlandish things. And then Russell Wilson ends up having a stinker of a game or something like that. And then Seahawks Twitter goes absolutely bonkers, which they're an interesting fan base on the internet.
What do they do?
Them. Mark hates them.
Yeah, when they go bonkers, what do you mean by that? Do they go after Russell Wilson ever?
Yeah, they basically bullied the Seattle staff into letting Russ cook. And then when it didn't work, they were like, why are we still letting Russ cook? And it's like, well, this is what you wanted. This is what you asked for.
The worst fans ever.
Mark hates them so much. He hates them. 12th man, Mark. They're the 12th man.
They're the 12th man.
Apparently, according to Derik, they're like the third man on the coaching tree as opposed to the 12th man.
Yes, they are.
It is funny because right after all that happened, Russell Wilson trademarked "Let Russ Cook." Like 5 minutes after, they had this explosion on offense at whatever game that it was, the Minnesota game, the Monday night game. Like 2 minutes later, Russell Wilson's posting something on Instagram or Twitter that he's in a kitchen cooking and it's trademarked now and he's making aprons. I don't know.
Yeah. The thing is that I want to ask you about the Seattle defense because they have been pretty remarkable over the last, 6, 7, 8 games. Now, we did talk about this either last week or the week before. 4 of those games came against the AFC East and the NFC East. So that's a little bit easier if you're playing the Patriots, the Jets, the Giants, and I think the Redskins at one point with Seattle. So I don't know how much we have to take into, but Jamal Adams is healthy as well. And so I just wonder if we're underestimating that defense coming into the playoffs.
Well, they were my Super Bowl pick, but you are right. They haven't been playing very, very top-notch offenses. So you wonder how real is that defense. And, maybe it's just for confidence. They have their confidence back after playing the Jets or whoever it is. Whoever it is. I mean, and that's really a thing that you get kind of these. I mean, in practices, they call it Feel Good Friday, where they tell the scout team quarterback to purposely throw picks to a defense. It's Feel Good Friday. So that could have been a feel good game for them that they kind of get back under a roll. I'm telling you, that's a thing. I had to do it my freshman year, and I absolutely refused to do it.
Oh, God. They're
like, just throw an interception to the defense. I'm like, how does that help us?
Right. Yeah. I can't imagine my high school coach even giving into that. And he had no idea what he was doing. Rest in peace, Mickey. We miss you. I have a difficult time getting a handle on Green Bay. I think everybody has. I mean, obviously the Aaron Rodgers story, they're going to be most likely. I don't think they've sewn it up, but they're going to be your number 1 seed. Matchup wise for them, who do you look at and say, this is a team that would give Green Bay the most difficulty?
Well, I think Tampa.
Say Tampa.
I was going to say Tampa, yes. And it's funny that I just talked about Seattle maybe laying a stinker. Seattle might give them issues too. Now they'd have to go into Lambeau and do it. But Tampa too, because, I don't think that's not going to bother Tom Brady going into cold weather into Lambeau. He played in Foxborough his entire career. So obviously that doesn't bother him at all. But just because Tampa has like I said, they're kind of like a heavyweight boxer that they can always throw a haymaker and really drop some points on some people. It's just really a week-to-week basis, and I think that they match up well against the Packers.
Take the over.
Always.
Yes, no doubt about that. All right,
life's too short to bet the under.
I like that. That's a great shirt to walk around with or a coffee mug.
Take the under on the Philadelphia-Washington game this week, though, folks. Good. That could be 3-2. I think it'll be a lower score. Could be a lower score than a Nationals Phillies game. I'm saying that's all I'm saying, right?
He has. He's been saying that for a while now, and I think it could be very accurate. Well, we've kind of touched on Baltimore, Buffalo. We've touched on Indy, Pittsburgh, but we haven't talked about the matchup that we have predicted based on Week 17 results, which would be Miami at Tennessee. How fun would this be? Ryan Tannehill faces his old team. The Dolphins have been probably the biggest surprise this year, I would say, perhaps. And against the Tennessee Titans, who none of us expected to be back in this position, possibly possibly at a record of 11-5, which is a very solid record. So who do you see in this one? 2 11-5 teams. I think Tennessee would have the advantage, but Miami's been sneaky, and they have a 1-2 punch, which you can't prepare for because the two quarterbacks are totally different.
So different, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. One is a gunslinger, the other one is a lot of RPO stuff, and they're not the same quarterbacks at all. I would still give the edge to Tennessee just because I think Tennessee's ability to run the football, even though last week they were held to only 94 yards where Derrick Henry was, which is still 6 yards away from a 100-yard game, and that's bad for Tennessee. I think Tennessee's ability to run the football, especially in January, I think you saw it last year when they went to Baltimore and they beat them. It's just that time of year that you got to have the ability to run the football, especially when the weather turns. The game would be in Nashville, if I'm correct. So, maybe it's a little bit colder. Miami's obviously they're playing games in the 80s in Florida in December, so it's not the same. So I just think that Tennessee just brings a whole level of physicality, especially in the run game. Now their ability on defense to really stop their secondary is really struggling. They haven't had a great pass rush this year. So should Ryan Fitzpatrick get into the game, he might have a little bit of a day and bring them back again for the 4,000th time.
Greatest folk hero of my lifetime in football. Greatest folk hero.
I think he entered the league when the Dead Sea was only sick.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So
Out of Harvard, by the way.
Yeah, but not too often you see some stuff like that. But I think that Fitzpatrick could give them some issues. Just the Tennessee secondary has kind of struggled this year. And then not, obviously having a pass rush at all really hurts them.
Yeah, and there's a chicken and the egg question as well. Is that did that secondary struggle because as we've talked about their inability to get to the quarterback? So that's really their big bugaboo. All right, before we let Derik go, and as always, our favorite segments on the show when Derik are here, and Mark and I will tap dance through the rest of the show once this is over and try to come up with something interesting to say. I want to ask you this question because I sent Mark a great article on Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator of the Kansas City Chiefs, who is a guy who's been on the short list for coach for a long time now, and he's certainly there this year. I have been outspoken in my distaste for Trevor Lawrence, though most of that's pretty much of an act. I said to Mark, I thought Eric Bieniemy, with his experience with Patrick Mahomes and what they do there, might be the perfect mix for a Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. As a former college quarterback, as a college football coach, knowledgeable guy, is that a marriage, knowing what you know about the offense in Kansas City and what Trevor Lawrence does, that you think might be a good move for Jacksonville?
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, anywhere where you can have the ability to coach Trevor Lawrence, I mean,
but I think he would benefit from Bieniemy as well.
Oh, absolutely. Just because I think Eric Bieniemy, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he has not gotten a job in the last 2 years. I mean, it's a crime, really. He is one of the better play callers, or if not the best play caller in the National Football League. And then, it's so good, so much so that even as the quarterback coach for the Chiefs is now getting attention for, head coaching and coordinating jobs. So that should just tell you right there how good he is. But I think that's a really good spot. I think on the short list for Bieniemy too is the Houston Texans as well, just because of Deshaun Watson and what he can do and how good he is with really no talent. He's been playing at an MVP level this year with just nobody around him. But in terms of Jacksonville, I mean, I think they have a ton of cap room.
$100 million, 11 draft choices,
yes,
and the overall number one pick.
And that's why I said that I think that's really the number one job. And I don't know when the last time anybody's been able to say that Jacksonville has been the number one job for general managers or head coaches or quarterbacks, really. But I think that this is it, that they have the ability to go win pretty quickly. They already have one of the younger teams in the NFL.
And there's talent there. The people who don't get to see them, there's talent on that football team.
There is. They week in and week out, and Doug Marrone does a great job. I mean, that's not a team that has completely just given up and quit.
Right.
So Doug Marrone still has the job, so they might bring him back. You never know, but
possibly. And we should point out that Eric sleeping with Bieniemy has bloodlines with San Diego, and that may be an open job too. And coaching Justin Herbert, I tell you what, I think it's great for Bieniemy because I agree with you. He should have been a head coach prior to this, but the fact that he may be staring at making a decision between coaching a team with Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, or Deshaun Watson, it may benefit Bieniemy in the end because if he has that position solidified,
that he's been shut out thus far, it may be the best thing for him. We'll see how good the NFL is with this. They got a D+ rating in diversity hiring for head coaches. They have an F rating for general managers. It's pretty ridiculous. Yeah. And Eric Bieniemy is clearly qualified, and we forget that he was a running backs coach. He got to Minnesota, and he coached up Adrian Peterson when he was 22 years old, and basically was the guy behind that Hall of Fame career. He gets to Kansas City. Jamal Charles has some great years, and then he coaches up Kareem Hunt when he first gets there. So he has some real experience offensively from the ground up, if you will, pardon the pun, and he'd be a great fit in any of those locations.
I think
I'd love to see him in Jacksonville.
I think, too, you could just tell the buy-in from the Chiefs. I mean, obviously they have a bunch of talent and everything, but the buy-in that offense has to believe in what they're doing in a week-in and week-out basis. Obviously, Andy Reid has a lot of say in that. But the way that they're able to just pull plays from 1935 or just scheme up some old college plays and their willingness to think out of the box and their creativity and really find plays from all spaces of football. I think that's such an important part now. I think, maybe 10 years ago, an NFL coach would kind of scoff at a college coach, and a college coach would scoff at a high school coach, and a high school coach would scoff at a Pop Warner coach. But the reality is that football is still football. So the ability and the want to learn from all different levels, I think, is so important. And really nobody does that better than the Chiefs.
No, and the reason we see these RPOs and a lot of this option stuff is because that's what high school quarterbacks, all of a sudden high school coaches won with it, college coaches won with it. So it builds from the ground up. It's trickle up. It's trickle up in the NFL. Well,
I still get advice from my dad. I text guys that I worked with in the high school or they coached me. I'm like, hey, how would you block this? How do you think you would do this? How would this maybe benefit? How do you like running power? How do you like running counter? And then, hey, obviously asking some of the guys in the NFL, hey, how do you guys do this? How do you like to do this? Obviously, that's a different animal because we don't have any, 6'5", 290-pound guards walking in a Coast Guard just because, they're hard to fit on a boat. But
why you call it a boat, not a ship even? My goodness.
Boat, ship, cutter. I'm learning all the words.
Cutter. There it
cutter.
is.
Yeah. So I got them all.
Well, it's going to be to your point, Johnny. There's going to be a lot of offensive. There's going to be a lot of coordinators gone after this year, and it's be interesting how the teams adjust to that. Obviously, Robert Saleh for the Niners at DC, he's going to go somewhere. Is it DeBall? Is that his name in Buffalo?
Daboll.
Offensive coordinator,
Brian Daboll.
Yep. He's gone. There's no way he stays the way that team has exploded this year, and that's going to, Stephon Diggs. Literally, the press conference says, I'm not going to say anything good about him because I want him to stay right here. So it's going to be interesting how these teams adjust to these coordinators.
I think you saw just not even coordinators, too, position coaches and quality control guys, too. I think that there's going to be a ton of movement this year just because I think there was a little bit of a halt last year because of COVID. They couldn't get anybody into the buildings. A lot of teams, and they just ended their internship programs. It was like, hey, we can't really interview anybody because we have no idea what's going to happen. We got to figure out how to have a season. So I think that coaching carousel and front office carousel kind of got backlogged into this year. I think that you're going to see a lot more movement just throughout staffs, and whether guys are out of the league or changing jobs within the league or going to colleges. There's actually been a lot of movement in college, far more than I thought that there would be, just because of the COVID stuff. And it's so hard to really judge a coach. How are you going to judge a coach during a pandemic that only played 6 games?
Right.
Maybe it's social media that they pressure these guys, alumni and stuff, pressure people into firing them and moving on. But, you always got to think what else is out there?
Yeah. That's good.
Great.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. Great. You fired somebody, but who are you going to replace them with?
Right. It's like when they take a poll before an election and it's like generic Democrat versus somebody who's a named Republican or vice versa. The generic person also wins. And it's like, well, that's great. But eventually that generic person has to actually be
have
person.
A name.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to be a lot of fun because how often do you have coaching changes where you have like Houston, San Diego, where you have a solidified quarterback play and you're still bringing a new coach. And normally that's the thing that coaches have to do. They have to settle on that. It's going to be really, really interesting, as is Matthew Stafford to the New England Patriots, which apparently that's the hot take for everybody, is that Matt Stafford's headed to the New England Patriots. And Robert Saleh will then have to find a quarterback once he gets that head coaching job, because that's probably going to be his. Or maybe they should bring back Jim Caldwell, who actually went to the playoffs with the same players that Matt Patricia finished 4-12.
He's another one. Marvin Lewis is another one that should have a job. These are all really, really high level coaches that should be working right now, and they just aren't.
Let's see if you can raise your grade to a D or a C minus.
Yeah,
NFL, maybe a C, maybe a solid C. Let's see if we can.
I've been saying that they need more Puerto Rican coaches, and I think I know a guy.
Yeah, absolutely. we would be 100% behind. Hey, Derik, man, thanks so much. As we move into the next year, having you on the show has been certainly a highlight for us. We greatly appreciate it. We have not shown any of your pictures as a child yet on the show.
I'm so thankful.
Well, time be's a coming, my man.
Yeah.
We might have to do that, but have a happy new year, and we'll talk to you in 2021, man.
You as well. Thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been awesome. Let's keep it rolling next year.
Absolutely. Happy New Year, man. Happy New Year.
Great stuff. Great stuff as always. And yeah, Mark, I tell you what, I'm going to go back to that again and again and again, that coaches this year are going to walk into positions, 11 draft picks, $100 million under the cap, and Trevor Lawrence is probably what you're going to get at Jacksonville. And to Derik's point, I am not a big fan, and I think we've seen this, of teams that with overturning their coaches on a frequent basis. But if somebody goes there and by year 3 isn't a playoff team, then they're probably a guy you want to shuttle out the door, because that is attractive. And the idea, how many guys are chomping at the bit for Justin Herbert, who has just been remarkable.
And that's the least hot seat out there of all the really hot seats we've talked about.
San Diego?
I think Lynn has a outside shot of keeping that gig.
I don't think you're going to get a lot of pushback from that. I think people are kind of looking at that as a 50-50 if he could get out. I think to Derik's point about the pandemic this year, and I think it's a well-made point, that a lot of changes didn't happen, probably coaching-wise, free agent-wise as well, because people didn't know with the pandemic. And I think, and you and I talked about this before the season and before baseball and everything, can you really weight what people's results were this season at 100% that you would in a normal season? I don't think you can.
No,
I think some guys have looked better. I think they're coaches who have been more fluid and have dealt with the COVID things and done better. General managers as well in front offices. But I think you have to take that into account. And you're right, that San Diego team, they're just sort of like John Gruden's Raiders, but throughout the whole season was it just they're letting games slip away from them, showing signs. But, in a Patrick Mahomes and in a division where you've got some pretty good football teams, the Raiders included, and Derek Carr's played very well this year. How patient will San Diego be? But I know there are a lot of coaches who are probably chomping at the Justin Herbert bit. Yeah,
I agree. But I look at your point, Jacksonville, $100 million, 11 draft picks, the first draft pick, Trevor Lawrence,
the overall number 1. Yeah,
you get you're in a position if Mr. Khan is smart, he hires a 1-2 GM coach combination, signs them for 6 years, and by definition gives them time.
Yeah.
Even if their first couple of years they don't get quite off the schneid,
because by year 3,
you
better show some improvement.
It is the year where you need to be at least a playoff contender with that kind of start going in. And to your point, it's already a pretty young team with some talent on there. But you need to give your coach and your GM, and this is what the Niners did. This is what Jed York did. You need to give them some security so they feel like they can build the team without looking over their shoulder.
Yeah.
And
It's a good blueprint. They've done a nice. We picked on the Yorks, and you did for a long time. There were decision-making things going on there, and none of us really ever. No one ever really figured out the whole Harbaugh situation. I think, at least to my knowledge, it still seems like there are some unanswered questions about where that went wrong. But you're right. In the interim, they have made some good choices, and that's a team decimated by injuries this year and a lot of things. But they're another team where I think week in and week out, people are like they play hard. It's interesting that Derik said that about Jacksonville and Doug Marrone. I think Doug Marrone was dealt probably a fairly poor hand in what front office movement, and I don't know how responsible he is for that. But can you imagine being Doug Marrone, and it's like next year you could have Trevor Lawrence, 11 draft picks and $100 million under the cap. But you know what? We're going to go with somebody else. I just hope, and this is not because I have anything against him. I think he's a terrific coach. I certainly appreciate what he did for the University of Florida, but I think hiring Urban Meyer would be a mistake.
And why do you feel that way?
I just don't. I think I want somebody who has NFL pedigree, running NFL offenses and dealing with. There's a lot about college football coaching, I believe, that's more difficult when it comes to recruiting. I think that takes up a lot more of your time. It is obviously a huge piece of the pie in college football, as we've seen. I want a guy who's an NFL guy. I want Eric Bieniemy in Jacksonville as a moderate Jacksonville fan. I think there are some other coaches as well who could do well there. But that just seems, to Derik's point, a guy who has no problem with being fluid with what they do. That offense is as multiple as any offense in the NFL and the things that they do. They have a once-in-a-generation quarterback. Okay, I'm not asking that Trevor Lawrence be Patrick Mahomes, and he probably won't be. But I think he would benefit from that because he has a skill set where he can work outside of script as well, off script. So I just think that's great. Eric Bieniemy is not going to get away from a head coaching. He won't be able to run away from a head coaching job unless he's offered ones that he doesn't want to take. And like I said, with Deshaun Watson, maybe Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence, too many attractive jobs out there. And Sam Darnold for that point, because there are a lot of people who feel he has just not benefited because he hasn't had good coaching as well. No, I don't think
very interesting. Doug Marrone, was 15-17 with the Bills, so he was fired after a 9-7 year, which is a little curious.
Yep.
And then, of course, he had the 1-10-6 season where they got to the championship game. It got very close to the Super Bowl, actually, the Jacksonville Jaguars. But in the last 3 seasons, they've won 12 games. Yeah. So I'm not sure 2020 is.
Well, they lost a lot of guys too. The front office, they lost Jalen Ramsey. Remember that defense?
Oh yeah,
carried them. I mean, it was the 2000 Baltimore Ravens again. And they lost so much talent off of that defense. They all wanted out of Jacksonville. Small market city. It's a tough sell. Shad Khan, I think, is a bright guy. And I think, but I really think that my worry is the Urban Meyer thing. And maybe Meyer will have success. Certainly it has happened. Guys have. But my worry is because of his success at Florida, I think one of the reasons Blake Bortles ended up there, and a lot of people would have drafted him certainly, was because he was a University of Central Florida guy. They also have a history of drafting guys out of Florida, Florida State at times. It's almost the regional thing that you go back to if you look at the history of the NFL in like the 40s and 50s, when they would look in Street and Smith's All-American list, and that's how they prepare for the draft. And it's like, well, this guy went to TCU. Don Meredith went to TCU. Certainly we want the Cowboys want him because, he'll put butts in the seats. So that worries me a little about Jacksonville. But I will continue my one-man campaign to get Eric Bieniemy the Jacksonville Jaguar job.
Right. I think it's more than one man at this point in time because I'm on that bandwagon as well. And I think you're right. He's going to get a job, and the NFL will go from a D+ to a C- perhaps in their diversity hiring. We had a game, speaking of college and not transferring well to the NFL, but we had a game last night in Orlando, Johnny.
Yep.
It's starting to get into the cool bowl time of year.
Yeah,
late December, the cool bowl times, the good bowl.
Sad yesterday though with Derik King from Miami getting the injury. I believe a torn meniscus. He has been one of the most dynamic players in college football, and who I think has the talent to put Miami back where I think we would all like to see them as a top 10 team. I think college football is better when they're a consistent top 10 team. Certainly, he hurt himself yesterday, but Miami put up a good fight with their backup quarterback, and they were chucking the football around there a little bit with him. Oklahoma State obviously comes out with a good win in that bowl game for the Cowboys. And then last night we saw the same sort of situation with Sam Ehlinger at Texas, who injured his shoulder. He's a guy with a ton of talent who hasn't been able to stay healthy. And their backup quarterback, though, they had the redshirt freshman kid came in just chucking the ball all over the place. So yeah, the bowl games are heating up a bit. I believe Wake Forest and Wisconsin happening even as we speak. Last I saw, Wake Forest was up by 2 touchdowns in that game. But we move into tonight's Cotton Bowl, which Florida and Oklahoma. Sure, it's a replay of the 2009 national championship game. Urban Meyer, I believe, final championship at the University of Florida. Blew out Oklahoma that night, which was unexpected. Without Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask takes more on his shoulders. The defense of Oklahoma is a very good defense, and I think they can slow down Florida's offense a little bit. But we saw in the SEC championship game that Florida can uncork it against a good defense. That's a good Alabama defense. I think the bigger question is, can the Florida defense, which I have been upset about since the opening game of the season, I believe it was Ole Miss, watched it just after I did the only job I'd have prior to the one that I have now in Lakeland. That defense gives up way too many big plays. They've been terribly, terribly inconsistent, even against the run. If Florida wins, it's going to be a shootout because I don't think they're going to stop Oklahoma, frankly.
Probably not.
And Oklahoma's defense is better than Florida's in my mind, or they're playing better at this point, certainly.
Right. But I mean, Florida's offense is pretty darn, Alabama's defense is good too.
Yeah, they are.
And Florida was able to shred them. I think Florida has a very, very good offense. I think Trask is, probably
one of the great stories of the year. One of the great stories of the year.
Underrated though right now because he had such a quick arc or a quick sort of meteoric rise, and then he's had a couple of games where he hasn't been brilliant.
Right, wasn't great against LSU. That was a subpar game. Came on against Alabama, though. I think really showed people what he can do.
So that was the 2008 season, by the way. That was Tebow's last season, so it was January of 2009, and it was still the BCS championship game back in the day. And it was 24-14, actually. And I remember it was a close game until that jump pass that Tebow had in the at sort of the very end to kind of make it a 2-score game.
I thought they kind of handled them in that game.
Maybe
Oklahoma came on late. Because I had a friend who's a former Oklahoma gymnast, and I was texting back and forth with him during that. And I remember early on, watched that at your old place, as a matter of fact, where you lived with our good friend Jerry Eisinger. Watched that game there. But these are different teams. Again, I've said this, and I think you've seen it play out. The Florida defense's inconsistencies are what cost them an opportunity to play for the in the playoff. Really, I mean, I think losing to Alabama certainly makes sense given Alabama's depth of talent. But Florida, that probably should be the only loss on Florida's resume, and they should be in the mix, and they're not because of their defense.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true. They've had an exceptional elite offense all year long, if you ask me, from game one. And so I'm looking forward to a fun, entertaining matchup. And I think that it'd be fun to see the Gators try and sneak one out. That'd be a lot of fun.
I think with Kyle Pitts, I would take Florida, but I think I'm sort of a push on this one because of the lack of Kyle Pitts. If Florida does win, and I mean, I'm not going out on a limb here, Kyle Trask is your MVP. There's no doubt about that. It really kind of falls to him, and he's risen to the occasion, and maybe wins himself a Heisman Trophy. I don't know. Are all the votes in by now? Because you're not supposed to pay attention to the bowl game for some ridiculously stupid. It's like if I've hit
it's the postseason thing with with the pro sports. It's.
None of us buy that. None of us buy that.
Again, usually the Heisman Trophy, though, is awarded prior to the bowl season.
Sure, yeah.
And so by definition, it is the truth with college football. It's not the truth with pro sports. Right. We know this.
But it shouldn't be with college football, in my mind. I honestly think they ought to wait to that. But
I agree. I agree as well. Now, Georgia is playing Cincinnati, and that's going to be a lot of fun. That's tomorrow. Is that right? Tomorrow. Yeah. So there's 2 top 10. So that's what we talked about. There's 4 games involving top 10 teams. So it's the perfect scenario, the perfect template.
And I have to admit to you, Mark, I'm going to admit something to you that college football is my favorite sport. You all right? You got issues?
I may.
Okay, fair enough.
I may succumb.
I better go get my test then here in a bit.
It's over Zoom.
And I love the bowl games. We've turned you on the bowl games for any number of reasons. Both Jeff and I gave you good reasons why they do exist, economically for the kids who may be playing their last college football games, and all kinds of reasons. Right by, but I got to tell you, this year, little difficult for me to tune into some of those games.
It's so ironic because this is what I've learned is that when you're trying to make a point, when you're trying to over decades make a point about something, or even in a heated argument that I don't know, you and I aren't very familiar with that with you or our friends, but the more you push.
I've never been kicked out of any of our homes. I'd like to point that out. No one has ever kicked me out. I did have the great what's his name? Romney. Romney once did threaten to take a swing at me on stage during a show, but that goes back a long way. So
yeah, there you go. And Romney, I believe, is leaving today.
Could be gone. All right,
if I'm not mistaken. So
don't even remember what he looks like.
At any rate, the more you push, the least likely, your chances of success go down. Let's put it this way. Right?
That's psychology.
It really is. So when you back off, all of a sudden, the opponent slowly but surely, oftentimes comes to your position. And that's what's happening now. I backed off the bowl thing. I said, you're all right. Kids, God bless them. It's their opportunity to have a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Why would I take that away from them? Who am I? All that. And now you're starting to see the light.
Now, I don't know about that. It's a COVID year, so we don't have some of the traditional.
Yeah, exactly.
Traditional teams involved. We've had, I think yesterday, or the day before, canceled the Texas Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of COVID issues. So it may be a 1-year thing, but I wanted to come clean as the last time I'll see you this year, or who knows? You got to cough. It's that I wanted to come clean and said I had a lot of difficulty not watching World War II documentaries. I actually have some great World War I documentaries I've been watching. Ooh. I've dialed into the bowl games, but nice. Kind of hard to stick around. It's a little hard to stick around.
All right, brother. Sounds good.
There you go. Any New Year's resolutions for you, Mark, before we get out of here? Do you have a sports resolution of anything that ties in or something else that you want to throw out there? I'm not a big one for New Year's resolutions because I never follow through with them.
Yeah, and look at my life. Clearly, I haven't even thought about New Year's resolutions, much less tried to do them. But if it's to get a little bit healthier, to become a little bit less of a screw up loser, to have more of a reason to exist,
narrow that focus a little bit. I mean, there's a little bit of a you don't want to be too macro on your
pretty broad.
Yeah, it really is. So but the good part about that is you could improve on a couple of things, and then you'd feel like you'd met your resolutions, but not really to the extent that you were thinking of when you made them.
Yes, maybe my overall resolution should just be to basically hold my feet to the fire with whatever I think is a healthy choice or decision.
Fair enough.
Number one, make decisions whilst thinking through them first. That's a good one.
Damn it, I hate that.
Oh, I know. I mean, I think, I haven't made a decision on that. Yes, you have. You've made a decision by not making a decision. You've made a decision. And just holding your feet to the fire in general about some things, I think would be very good for me. Odds of that happening, I don't know. Yeah. Perhaps they're better because it's like, what else is there to do at this point in time? But there's a few small gigs on the horizon.
Maybe the D League or the G League, whatever they call the minor league there for the NBA, talking about bubbling at Disney. and playing from, I think, the end of January through early March. I'll be otherwise occupied. So maybe I think you ought to just send it out. Do something that you and I would never do. Be proactive.
Be proactive. Romney will be out of state. You'll be otherwise engaged.
I'm otherwise employed.
I'm all they have, unless they want to actually go with people who have experience and are younger and prettier.
Well, you have experience.
I do have some experience
PA for basketball, and
yes, I do.
And you could bubble easily.
Sure,
might be a little more difficult for Romney as a daughter, and you could do, and what is it? It's like 6 weeks. That's it. Yeah. And you're staying in a hotel over there. I think they're feeding you
right up my alley.
Like assisted living. It's as if it's like it's a social program, but you have to like work a little bit of a gig on this.
It's a work program.
What? If we're gonna give you this money, you got to take a class or do something so you're improving yourself.
Sure, we're going to put you up. We're going to feed you, and if you can just kind of walk the 8 steps to the arena, sit down for 8 hours, and do a few games, then we'll continue that. Yeah, that would work. That would be perfect for me. Actually.
That'd be a good one. That'd be a good one for you. It just all the things you'd order on Amazon would pile up on your porch. That would be the only downside, because we know that in the past that's been your proclivity to just. I ordered a book so I could do the research, and then I left town for a year. So I got what I could off Wikipedia.
Happened one time.
Did you ever read the book?
I did. I did, and I also was able to get a lot of it online as well. Not the whole thing, but I was able to get certain sections of it that were key for my research into the Big Red Machine.
Which one was the Big Red Machine?
It was the first one. It was the very first one. So there you go. I think that's the other thing. I want to do some deep dive. That should be our collective. Come on now. It's our collective New Year's resolution, John,
to do
that we actually try and promote this show on a consistent basis for maybe a month to see what happens. And I think we should do deep dives again, because that would set us apart a little bit, because there's how many sports talk podcasts are out there right now?
1.6 million.
There's 1.6 million. Now we could be, we could definitely be even in the top 3%, even in the top 1%, John. Yeah. And that's still, we're competing with 16,000 other shows.
Look at you doing the math.
Well, it was easy. It was just.
And you also know you could literally have said any number there, and I would have agreed, because I can't do math.
I know, it's so interesting. It's so interesting, but it's 100 blocks. It's the 100 block theory that you said. Yeah. So anyway, so there it is. I think we should collectively on the air right now, before the dwindling amount of listeners, because I think they're all gone. Chiming in for Derik. Yes, they all split. They all jumped off the ship once Derik left.
I know, he's like the opening band that's better than the closer.
Yes,
you know what I mean. It's like early days of Kiss. They'd go on stage, blow band away, and there were bands that said, "We're not going to go. We're not going to follow that." So
good stuff. Well, that's fun. That's a fun story. All right, collectively, we make we decide to promote the show. We decide to commit to the marketing of the show for a month. Okay. What do you say? Publicly,
and that includes
all of these listeners.
Okay. All right, I'll do it. I thought you were going to say we commit to doing at least one deep dive a month, or at least a deep dive for January. I kind of prefer that with my gig going on right now. I kind of prefer that you do that, though it may actually benefit me, because I have all this time in the car to listen. I can do audiobook stuff. So who knows?
Listen to other podcasts as well about the topic.
Yeah, it's a good point. Very good point.
So
there you go.
I think that would be. I think personally, I think that would be part of the marketing strategy, is to do that at least once a month. So I assume that's going to be part of what we discover. And certainly I would be up for the January one as well, because I'm kind of chomping at the bit to do another one.
All right, fair enough. There you go. That's what you heard, people.
72 is beckoning.
It's a great year. Great 72 Washington football team. Oh my God. In 73, I was a mascot for the Washington football team. I could show pictures and,
See, that'd be perfect for the multimedia deep dive, which you hate. You hate anything multimedia because it involves visual medium.
Yeah, I don't want to look at it.
But it would be fun. It would cross over your first deep dive, which was the Oakland A's, Swinging A's, whatever they called themselves.
The
Amazing A's. It was the Big Red Machine. That was the second World Series of that run they had. We've talked about the Olympics before.
And the early 70s is our sweet spot because of our age. It's our sweet spot. It's when we were paying. You turned 12 and you were 12 then. I was 8. That's when you start watching. So we probably know as much about sports from 1970 to 1980 as we do at any other point in time.
It's a good point, which is why all of our deep dives haven't gone past the year 1980, with the exception, of course, of the Philadelphia one that touched on the 83 76ers.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point. All right, everybody, have a safe and happy new year. It's good luck, people. That's all I got to say. Moving. Good luck. We wish you nothing but luck.
Yeah, that's very, very sweet of you, John, to wish everyone luck in this new year. What are your thoughts on this whole thing? What do you think?
As far as
when this is all behind us, when we all can kind of take a deep breath and go out sort of at will. Is it June? Is it July?
I think it's the
later
fall.
than that.
I think it's the fall. I think by next football season, we'll kind of be at the point where, as long as, these other virulent strains of this don't pop up, I think by then start loosening up in the summer. We'll see what baseball does. That'll be interesting. Spring training. As I've said, these for 2020, you can complain all you want about CEOs and commissioners, but they earned their paycheck and they're going to continue to through the beginning of this. So anyway, fingers crossed, happy, healthy, have a great new year. Don't go anywhere. Don't be around anyone. Don't make eye contact with anyone because we want to see you all back in 2021. Mark Ferreira, he departed. Jeff Taylor, who was sad to find out he departed, actually sent us a text.
Yes, he did.
Asking himself to rest in peace. I'm John Pelkey. You've been listening to After Further Review. See you in 2021, everybody.
Bye-bye now.